I want to welcome you. I consider you guys heroes. I often read so much, but little did I get in contact with people, except in very few occasions. But this is one of the best. And if you look at what we are doing here, it's essentially to bring people together. SDIG is committed to bringing people who do not talk to one another, bringing leaders who do not talk to one another, and have them engage with one another. Because we do believe that we are losing so much, either by keeping some people outside or having small units that say kumbaya to what we say. If you remember President Johnson's view when the Vietnam War was going on, part of the problem was that they have, people who are in certain group, and when some other people who may object are coming, they say, "Here, stop the war. See where they're coming." It never stops. We have somebody I respect and regard very highly, former Secretary of State and Chief of Army Staff, Colin Powell, who considers himself as a reluctant warrior. He just passed. And we will all remember him as somebody who did his work with courage, even when things were rough. He did all he could, and that's what we're gonna be doing. So what SDIG does is consistent with people who could speak to power, say, look, this is the right way to do things. But when we bring people together, they talk to one another. By talking to one another, they elevate their learning level, they elevate the ability to see beyond their views. They see what we consider multiple story. Ngozi Adichie talked about the danger of single story. But we bring all these things together to argue for our position that our platform is for everyone, especially those whose stories are marginalized, put on the wayside. In some cases, put in prison for that story. I read about someone who had spent his 40 years in jail for a crime he did not commit. How could you tell that story? When I read such things, I personalize it. I personalize it, supposing it was me for something I did not do. How would I feel? And I want each and every one of us here to feel that way. And you gotta understand the reason why we have whistleblowers is for them to expose the wrongs. If we don't do that, God help us. So as I said, we provide this opportunity. So if you have a story, this is a platform that welcomes you. And that's how we operate. So without taking too much time, because if we get into talking about SDIG, it's so much that I can talk about. I wanna, again, thank our panelists, and then I'm gonna have them, or rather Kelly, if you will ask them the first question about how they could tell us about themselves. You go.
Okay. Can everyone hear me right now? And I'm staying off camera right now because bandwidth is a little on the low end on my side. But anyway, what are we doing here? Each of you, as I mentioned at the beginning, will have 7 minutes to kick off the panel. by introducing yourselves. In each of your answers, please be sure to include how your work in the military and in post-military settings aligns with SDIG's global vision for equity and social justice for all. And I think we will go with Karen first. Here.
Oh, okay. Thank you. I'm the lucky first one.
Yes.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here with each of you. I'm Dr. Karen Walker, Lieutenant Colonel, United States Marine Corps. I'm supposed to bark and growl for you. That's what we do as Marines. Retired. And I served 21 years in the Marines, 3 combat tours. And I will say, as a female in the Marines, I've seen, a lot of change over the years. Being in the Marines, came in 98 and then left in 2019 after they changed to allow women across all the different job fields in the armed forces overall. But now the work that I do is as an organizational psychologist, which is really studying human behavior at work. So I get pretty nerdy about building different assessments and measurement tools to help organizations do that, from selection to classification to leadership development and organizational culture, which is some of the fun work that I do. It's an honor to be able to talk on Veterans Day, and usually anytime I'm able to be surrounded by veterans is an honor and a privilege, especially other Marines. I have some other Marines on the panel today, and quite possibly in the audience as well. A lot of what I talk about and consult with other veterans is from the heart and my own experiences. I served just over 10 years active duty, and then the rest was reserve time with the military. And that experience allowed me to see also the transition experience for military members. And a lot of my passion is in that area now, in helping that experience for veterans when you leave active duty. And then trying to navigate the civilian workspace is very challenging, and for veterans as a whole, but also for women veterans as well. When I left active duty, I had a PhD, 3 combat tours. I was selected to be major in the Marine Corps, and everybody told me you'll have no problems finding a job. And I went out to the workforce with that mentality and was applying for everything I thought I was supposed to be doing, leading kind of these Fortune 500 companies. And you'll quickly find there's a, gap in how the world sees a female veteran versus how you're seen in the military with your, kind of compadres, right? I mean, rank in the military doesn't see gender necessarily. You've earned your rank through doing the same thing that you did with your other Marines. I mean, I earned every rank that I had because I did my job. When you get out of the military, they don't understand, civilians don't understand rank, first of all. They don't understand everything that you've done, and you're fighting a gender equity gap as well, just, by our social justice system. So a lot of times there's a lot of education process just to help people understand as veterans what you've been through, what you've done, all that you've accomplished, kind of teaching them that language. But then also as a woman officer or, senior enlisted or, whatever your job field is, that you did everything that your male, partners did, and that, that equal pay doesn't equate on the civilian sector at all. And so it was quite a challenge. I was unemployed for nearly a year when I made the transition from active duty to the reserve forces, on the civilian side, just looking for work. And from that experience, I developed a program for women veterans. specifically that focuses on professional development called Combat Boots to Heels. So that really focuses on looking at your skills and your abilities, all that you've taken from the military, combining it with your passions to build up your confidence to move forward and make the jump into different career fields, like what my degree actually was in, IO psychology. So living the dream now. I think that my time might be up. So I'm ready to
You've got
pass.
a couple of minutes
Oh, do I?
left here. Yeah.
Well, I'm used to,
Exact-
doing my elevator pitch pretty fast. So, well, yeah, well, I'll talk a little bit more about that program and the assessment also that I've developed with that. It's called FSET. It stands for 4 key components that we found to be necessary, specifically in transition, but it's F for femininity, which it has 2 scales, right? Femininity, masculinity, but it's not, are you female or male? It's, more of like, how secure are you in who you are? And as that applies to the work that you do as well. The S in it is self-efficacy, which is different than self-esteem. It's your belief in your abilities. And then the E is emotional intelligence, and the T is teamwork. And that talks a lot about going beyond just traditional teamwork of task-oriented positions, but also collaboration. A lot of times veterans are used to doing teamwork. Put me on a team, I can get the job done, I can do a task. But in the civilian world, it's more about collaboration, building those relationships. And sometimes you have a meeting just to have a meeting, and that can be very, very frustrating. Because we're like, what are we doing here? We're not just meeting to have coffee, are we? Really? But yeah, in the civilian world, sometimes you do that, and you have to do that. And so it's about teaching the military veterans in transition that, working on your collaboration skills can be very helpful in building relationships and partnering and networking and how to do that. So, I've built an assessment that helps people assess kind of where they are in those key areas, and then build kind of short-term, mid-term, and long-term goals of where they want to be. So I think I filled those last 2 minutes.
Perfect.
Thanks.
Okay. Next, I think we will go with Duncan. They came back online just on time. I got knocked off of there for a moment.
Yeah, someone had a question for Dr. Walker.
Okay.
Yes, okay.
Not yet.
Oh, well,
not
no,
yet.
yeah. Well, hold on.
Yeah.
But
Hold
maybe we
on.
can take it.
It's
Maybe
gonna
we
be
could-
Duncan. Duncan gonna go introducing himself. There are 3 sequences to this. The initial one, then individuals, that's our panelists, have to talk about what they do and how they are moving forward. And then the second part will be the question. So if you have a question, please hold it for just a few minutes, then you can come up with your question. I'm glad that you're gonna be asking those questions. All right.
Yeah. And they're in the chat too. So anything that you have, put them in there. We'll call them out when the time comes here.
Or you raise your hand.
Yeah.
Mr. Duncan.
Hey, hi, y'all. I appreciate being here with you. It was great to hear Karen's story and hear grunt and growl as a Marine, because that's some good stuff. And I intersect there, and I'll tell you about that. But before, as a kid growing up, I was influenced by my family's past. And also the wars that were fought, World War II, the American Civil War. These things impacted my family greatly. And they also impacted their children, my grandparents, and things like that. So how did that impact me growing up? How did war and conflict impact me? I was tremendously blessed and grateful for the multicultural, pluralistic society and family that I grew up in, and where all values are respected. And as a 17-year-old kid, I quit high school and like a big dummy. And back then you could join the Marines without a high school diploma. So I did. And my recruiter was, he's now a retired Master Gunnery Sergeant, and I'm connected with him on LinkedIn. He's from the Baltimore area. Gunnery Sergeant, he was then Gunnery Sergeant Holloman. And he was a dark green Marine, and which is an African American, and he came to me and said, "Hey, you know, you could join the Marines." And I said, "Okay, that sounds great." So I did, and again, the Marine Corps back then, when I joined, was a different monkey to say. Females weren't allowed to shoot a weapon. It was completely different story. Fast forward to today, or to the Iraq invasion, and I'm fighting from Kuwait to Baghdad in 2004 or 3, whatever it was, getting to Baghdad with females on my side, you know, female mechanics, female all cooks, all different kinds of females doing different stuff. Yet even then in 2003, 4, and 5, females weren't allowed to be in combat. And there was a lot of talk about that, and it kind of hurt me, because here I was standing next to a female warrior. She's firing downrange, and then Congress is arguing, why shouldn't females be in combat? It just didn't make sense. There was a lot of stuff that didn't make sense. I served as an Army officer in civil affairs, and what that was is civil affairs is I went to the local populace and tried to reach the populace, and tried to bring Doctors Without Borders, tried to bring electricity to the villages, and tried to enhance their situation. I did that because my background is an American, but also my background is a Muslim, because I'm a Muslim, and I've been that way almost my entire life. And so I was able to reach people in the villages in Iraq and Afghanistan a little bit better, because I self-identified as a Muslim. And it was very helpful to do that. I experienced a lot of prejudice when I got out of the military. I mean, as a recovering, you know, Marine, as a recovering military guy, Army guy, combat wounded. It was just a very difficult experience coming out of the military and trying to get a job. And far so much as I started a veterans group within the Department of Human Services, where I work as a crisis child welfare social worker. And I did that because I noticed that nobody appreciates the veterans. Even just a couple of days ago, right before the holiday, there was a big statement about supporting Department of Human Service people through the holidays, and they didn't mention the Veterans Day at all. And again, it's just unlike when I was growing up. World War II was still very much, World War II and Vietnam was going on, so World War II was still very much in everybody's eyes and ears. And so I think the acceptance of understanding how World War II affected people, it was lost. And I think that the people are lost today when they don't understand what veterans go through, what veterans went through, and the difference between, you know, a veteran and a non-veteran or a civilian. There's just fundamental differences. And every day at the VA, I also volunteer at the VA, and I volunteer in crisis support for suicide, and try to stop the 22 suicides a day of the veterans. And I do that as a combat veteran, as somebody that's been downrange, somebody that's fought in combat, and ended up, you know, blessed with a couple of several combat awards, including, you know, like I said before, the Purple Heart and an award for valor. But other than that, I'm just blessed to be here amongst y'all. I'm very interested in supporting folks through their journey of transition. And if I can use my life experience of coming through as a combat wounded person, and making that transition. That's what I want to do. And I also want to bridge between the I guess the right wing, or the folks in America that are prejudiced towards people of color, or people like me that are Muslim, people of color being my son, and things like that. So I want to bridge that gap, and I want to support people, and we need to see people eye to eye. And also, I was very motivated, and I heard Gary Smith's accent, so he's got to be from my neck of the woods somewhere down there. But I'll turn this over to y'all, and I really appreciate being on this, and also hearing from Lieutenant Colonel Walker. Hoorah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hoorah.
Okay, Gary, you're next here.
Well, good afternoon, and thank you all for the first two presenters for definitely sharing their stories, and which is phenomenal. And I like to say, you know, where I come in, where I intersect here, you know, in my story. So my story has always been about, you know, serving something greater than myself. You know, my family been all Army, you know, the United States Army, my entire family. But in my little small town of Walterboro, South Carolina, you know, I was introduced to something different through a tragic, a national tragedy, which was the Beirut bombing. And the Beirut bombing happened on the 23rd of October, 1983. And my little town of Walterboro, South Carolina, which is off of I-95, only two exits, 57 and 53. We were devastated because one of our sons of Walterboro was killed in the Beirut bombing. His name was Lance Corporal Michael Sauls. And like I prefaced the conversation, you know, I probably would have went in the Army. That's all I knew was the Army, because all my family members were in the Army. But because Lance Corporal Sauls was a Marine, and he got killed in the Beirut bombing, and my town was devastated. So, you know, I knew my town was in mourning. So I didn't know what a Marine Corps was, but I knew that I wanted to be a part of that because he lost his life. He was a Marine. And as my town mourned, you know, I said that, hey, I'm going to go take his place. And so, hence, first generation Marine. And that was my story. You know, I only want to go do 4 years because I wanted to take Lance Corporal Saul's place and finish his time. He was 18 months into his time. And I was just going to do 4 years, finish his time. But 4 years turned into almost 28 years, almost 3 decades. And because, you know, it was all about service. Now, and all those almost 3 decades, you know, I've been to combat in multiple tours, which is, you know, I didn't volunteer to go, but, you know, in the Marine Corps, hey, when you get your orders, you go. Because I would tell you, war is not, the human body is not built for war. And I like what America does. We try to get our diplomats to go in first and make peace. And then when those measures fail, then we have to break out, you know, what we call the arrows, and we go do what diplomacy, you know, what we can't do in diplomacy, then we do the kinetic ops. So mine has always been about service. So, you know, where do I connect? And with the, you know, SDIG, where do I connect here? And well, I would say this right here, you know, from a, Dr. Walker probably can attest to this, being the, you know, from a, you know, psychological aspect of you know, psychology, you know, I take on a dentologist view. You know, I believe in what is good for all of humankind, what is good for humanity. And that's pretty much because in the military, we believe that we assimilate just about every hue in America. You know, we assimilate all these cultures together to become one, because we understand in the military that we have to be on one accord. There's one vision, which is, you know, what the U.S. Constitution and what we believe in, and it is good for the masses because it was built for the masses. yes, we have problems, things that, sometimes we don't get it right, which, we see play out in our democracy. But I will tell you, from having been all over the world, America is the best place on the planet, because if we get the right to the ability to disagree. We have the right to say, hey, we don't like our leadership, because that's what being an American is all about. And Mr. Joseph, I heard you spoke about Colin Powell, which he was a proponent of that. So what that you are a Muslim, but you are American? So what that you may have, you may be Hispanic, Black, Asian, but you are an American. And because you are an American, you have the rights to all those things. And I'm reminded of a former Secretary of Defense, Gerald Mattis, Secretary Mattis. When he left the administration, when he resigned and left, there was a speech that he put out, which he referenced. He was using a metaphor. He referenced hold the line. He turned to the military and he left that speech and he said, hold the line. We all knew what he meant. He said, hold the line because we are the last line. We have to defend Americans. They have rights, regardless of what you look like, but we have to make sure we emulate what right looks like. And it's all about meritocracy, performance, being that you have, and being an American citizen, there's certain inalienable rights that every American is afforded, and we will defend that. And I believe in that. And so I think, SDIG, I just, studying and reading, and I think you all are definitely on the forefront to ensure, because we have to ensure that, these rights, everybody has the ability to achieve, these rights, because you are in America. And in America, we do these things. And so, me individually, I come from an underserved, community of color. And what I'm trying to do, I'm trying to make sure I invest in our youth, because there are so many, and because our youth is our future. If you don't invest in the youth, we're going to have problems. There's going to come a time when it's time to pass the baton, there's nobody there to receive it. And these things don't happen by osmosis. There has to be education. There has to be an investment. And so I am trying to make sure that I give back into that group right there, our youth, because it was given to me. There's a bunch of mentoring programs that I'm a part of. One major one here in the state of Virginia, where I go back and, and I'm helping out with the at-risk youth, with leadership development, because that is key. Now, many times I think, man, am I making a difference? But hey, one person at a time, I'm trying to help the youth, because we have to invest in our youth, because, I know this is a well, said saying, the youth, they are our future. And so,
yes, they are indeed, sir.
And I believe in
yes,
that. And
yes,
thank
they
you.
are. And you're welcome very much. You'll have time later on to expand on all of that. Thank you. At this point, we're going to open the floor to questions. And let's see what we had one in here. Akil had asked, and this was directed to Dr. Walker. For me, a soldier is a person who cared about his family in the past. And in the present, he cares about the whole nation, and who doesn't have worries about the future. Am I right or wrong? Or is it just a job like other government jobs? I just need to know the exact feeling of being a soldier.
Sure. I mean, I love that. I think I'm not sure if you're asking, it seems like maybe you don't have experience with the military at all. I'm trying to put it in perspective. It's hard to get the subtext from text. But I think it is like Gary said, I mean, the military is a microcosm of the world, right? We get pieces of everyone from everywhere that they come. So yeah, in one element, yeah, I mean, everyone in the military is fulfilling a role, and they bring their characteristics with them. So we do look for unique characteristics, right? We want people that are going to really care about the people on their left and their right, and also our nation. So I would say that we do look for people that are really committed, and conscientiousness. I mean, there are certain characteristics that in the military, I think that all around we would have, but you do have individuals that are going to have, greater levels of, that altruism that you're looking for, or empathy, depending what job field, you're definitely in. But also the leadership aspect. I think that the military creates and develops some of the best leaders we have. And one aspect of that is really knowing and understanding your people, and being able to really have those deep conversations with them. That's some of the things that I really loved about the Marine Corps, is being with my Marines and leading Marines. There's nothing else like that. It's a true honor and a privilege to be able to be with your Marines and to lead Marines, and to walk into a room and be surrounded with your Marines. I mean, I think any leader would say that. I think, Gary, you could probably add some to the mix, and Jarrell as well, of what does it feel like to be in the military. I mean, it's I think, but like any job, I mean, of course, there's going to be things you don't like about it and things that you love about it. I mean, of course, I didn't like, sleeping in the rain and cold, and, things that are hard, of course. But I mean, you also love the aspects of, things that I will always love about the Marine Corps, and the military overall. And I think that's the people.
Duncan, Gary, have added to the question.
So absolutely, I think the question that's as common question that I get asked all the time. What makes you stick around? I mean, because like I preface, I was only going to do 4 and I was done. But as your fellow service member to your left and your right, that as you go through those shared sacrifices together, there's a bond, and it keeps you going. And that's that mystique that, in the Marine Corps, we have a motto we call Semper Fidelis, which to us is non-negotiable. It means always faithful. I mean, it's because that bond that, as Dr. Walker said, sometimes there's some things you don't like to do, and but you get through it and you see it through. And there's when you're serving something greater than yourself, it's just undescribable.
Okay. Duncan, you want to add to that one?
Well, I don't want to speak for Lieutenant Colonel Walker or Dr. Walker. I'm going to just call her Lieutenant Colonel because, I'm still a Marine. But Lieutenant Colonel Walker is a Marine, and as with Gary Smith, they're both Marines. They're not soldiers, and I want to clarify that, because I was a soldier. I was a Marine first, and then an Army officer. So a soldier is different than a Marine, and Lieutenant Colonel Walker is a Marine, and I want to make that clarification, and because I understand the world of the Marine Corps and the world of the Army. I am a soldier. I'm retired, but I'm also a former enlisted Marine So I'll forever be a Marine. It's ingrained in me. It's important to understand that whatever service you join, whether my fellow airmen are out there and sailors, it doesn't matter which service, or Coast Guardsmen, any of those folks that serve their country, they're serving their country, and they're in a uniformed service and they're serving their country. Even my brothers in the UK and the Royal Commandos and those folks and those Fusiliers that I served with, they were all serving their country. And every person is motivated or should be motivated to do that.
Thank you. And I see another question in the audience, and I think this could, each of the three of you could answer this one. This is from Robert Robinson and says, I am a national diversity consultant from 2015 to 2017. I worked with a federal agency who hired lots of former military personnel, especially in security positions, nuclear subs, engineering, and they received veterans' preferences in hiring. This was great, yet in the military, there is diversity. In this federal agency, diversity was shunned. Death threats were made against me. A gay man from a Gold Star family, a Muslim, Black, nuclear engineer, and others. It was a hostile environment deemed so by the federal government. How can you veterans address such hostilities to those mentioned differences when each of those diverse military vets as employees served our country for the common good of the United States of America?
Sure. I mean, I'll take that. I think there's a couple different things in there. I mean, I'm sorry that's happening, of course. I mean, you never want to hear that. And I think there's channels that need to, you know, be addressed there. I mean, we have the EEOC as a source, you know, to directly affect federal agencies or any corporation, you know, that is doing any type of discrimination or harassment in any way like this. So first and foremost, always, you know, you want to direct people there. I will say, you know, with the military, they had Don't Ask, Don't Tell. The Don't Ask, Don't Tell, you know, was repealed in 2010, I believe. But even with that, there was still a lot of fear and harassment for, you know, the lesbian, the gay, and bisexual, transgender kind of community throughout the military, you know, aftermath of that repeal. So I think the military has done quite a bit to try and bring in like different affinity groups, and also the federal government having affinity groups in their commands and in their departments to try and help deter that and to be more inclusive. So I'd say that is something that could be encouraged. And I think, but most of all is making an awareness if this is happening in your organization to report it, and report it, you know, urgently, because that needs to be stopped.
So I like to recapitulate also what Dr. Walker just said. In that case, yeah, definitely, you know, so de jure and de facto. Of course, you know, de jure is the law. But then again, in many instances, okay, well, this is what's actually happened, which turns out to be de facto policy. And in that case, you know, obviously, you know, we know de jure, especially in the federal government, those things should not be happening. But guess what? But when you have, you know, like-minded individuals that have those corrupt ideals, de facto policy is what's actually happening on the ground. So, but, you know, John Fitzgerald Kennedy, an American president, you know, he made a comment and said that, hey, one man can make a difference and every man should try. Well, Sergeant Major Gary Smith says one person can make a difference and everybody should at least try. And obviously it seems as if you are trying. and you have to be persistent and continue to try. And those policies that says that these are the things that we have to use to weed out, then you have to do those things, because those things should not be occurring. Diversity and inclusivity of thought is so important, and it what makes America so strong.
I'd like to say that I too am sorry that occurred. I fight that kind of stuff daily, and I advocate for folks, but I want to circle back to what Sergeant Major Smith said when he said talking to the youth, and he mentors his youth. This kind of hate and this kind of rhetoric that goes on started when they were children. And I would recommend that we go back and talk to our children so that they don't have the hate. There's a lot of organizations out there that support children and support pluralistic and multicultural events. And those are imperative for children to see, hey, that we're all human beings and we all need to care about each other and love one another and not have violence and not advocate violence. And we need to stop that hate and that rhetoric now.
Right, and if you allow me just a second to follow up, may I do that?
Yes, yes, please.
So in my case, my death threat occurred a year or 9 months prior to the one for the black male engineer who was in his 30s. They were at the same location at a nuclear plant. And mine was swept under the rug, and it took 9 months for it even to get to the CEO's desk, because it was a perpetuator organization of 80% white males in the South, 5 southeastern states to be exact. And the man was never fired, and it was never addressed because he was a member of the union. But he was downsized 9 months later and let go through rifts. And then when the black male engineer, he came out as a Muslim at the end of the day. He said, I just want to come out to you guys today. And I thought he was going to come out as gay. And he said, no, but I'm a Muslim. And just like all Christians aren't KKK, not all Muslims are ISIS. And I said, well, that was very brave of you to do, after our discussions today. And I turned to my co-trainer, who was an in-house human resources person, and the white male co-trainer said, no, they're just going to shoot him, in front of the whole class. And so I filed an HR report, and the response, I documented the whole day down to the letter. And when I filed the HR report, the HR director called me and said, Robert, is this your first day doing diversity? And I said, no, sir, I've been doing this for 26 years. And I said, this is my 105th class in your organization. And this was a legitimate death threat. And he tried to ameliorate the situation. Well, who is they? Can you pinpoint who they is? But what we knew was that it was the KKK who had infiltrated the organization and was leaving pamphlets and documents in the workroom, in the lunchrooms, and different places. And they were hanging nooses throughout work sites and nuclear plants throughout the Southeast for those 3 years. And when the FBI came in to investigate, the FBI then received a welcoming committee of Confederate flags and nooses. And then from there, it went to bringing in 5 people like me to facilitate the peace, if you will, and embrace diversity. And the end result, of course, perhaps, or maybe not the end result, but a manifestation of that, where some of those people attended the Capitol riots on January 6th, some of those same people. And that's all I have to share. But it was a precursor of undercurrent and anger that may have contributed to the current state of affairs in our nation.
Thank you. We've got a couple of additional questions that came through. One of them is from Ahmed Patel, and he wrote, I came across Duncan on LinkedIn. To me, he embodies courage and integrity. Gary Smith also made some pertinent points. The youth is our future, and together we are all stronger. And then his question, he's coming down, how difficult is the shift from military to civilian life? Also to Karen, well done, amazing discussion. I agree. So we go back to the question on how difficult is the shift from military to civilian life. Maybe an elaboration on points that were made earlier this morning. And any of you can start first.
I'll go ahead and take that. I really had a rough go coming out. There was no transition. We were in a deployment cycle, in a continuous deployment cycle, and it was just incredible. And I bailed out. Before going back to Afghanistan again, and because my son was 3 at the time and he was sick. He was at the Children's Hospital of Kansas City, and he was a sick child and failure to thrive, and it didn't look good for him. So I was like, well, I'm not going back to Afghanistan. So I got out of the military, and there wasn't any transition time, and I had just gotten back from Afghanistan, and I was supposed to go to Iraq, and so when I retired, there was no planning to retire per se, and I jumped into a job, and I was really prejudiced against, and for a myriad of reasons. I supported folks. I was an anti don't ask, don't tell person, so I supported folks that were LGBTQ in the military, and I supported those trying to stay in. And so I was targeted when I got out because I was working with fellow military folks, and I was targeted either because I was a whistleblower, because of torture in the CIA torture in Iraq, or I was a Muslim, or I supported LGBTQ folks. I'm not sure which it was, but regardless, I caught bloody hell, if I could say that on the internet. And I caught a lot of flack, and it was so egregious that I just left that. And then I found my calling as a social worker. So it was a blessing in disguise. But again, it was very difficult. It was almost to the point of committing suicide or taking my own life.
Wow.
So I'll just
Gary?
say
Sure.
my transition was pretty easy because you know for the length of service that I've done, I knew my train stopped where it was time for me to get off. Either you come to expiration of service, but mine was, I had a job offer, and a job offer that that a dream job that I couldn't pass up. And so with that, I was able to transition. So number one, having a job, which is big, I got a job, I'm transitioning to that job. So it made the transition much smoother. And so for that, transition into the civilian sector, was good. And also I was able to, all I did was take the uniform off. And so I stayed around my Marine brothers and sisters in that military environment. So it was, I didn't, whereas a lot of my peers went out in small town America somewhere away from that environment that they were so comfortable. So I kind of assimilated into the same environment. So my transition was easy.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Ah,
No,
There you
I'll
go.
say I talked a little bit about mine in my intro. So I think, I think it's the transition experience is different for each veteran. And I think that we do our best to we have something called a TAPS class, which is a transition assistance program, I believe, that they have for every veteran as they prepare to leave the military. But as Duncan explained, it's not always, something that's feasible with life and planning, in some cases. but you know, it has its shortfalls as well. You know, you can't put everything in there because everybody's life situation is different. But you know, transitioning from the military to civilian life is a challenge for many of our veterans because of the things that we've had to navigate in military life, and then transitioning to civilian life, and building those networks as a civilian, and depending where you're relocating to, it's just trying to, you know, build up those connections, as Gary said, is going to be really crucial and important.
Thank you. Wow, we are getting a lot of questions in chat. I am really happy to see this here. Our next one is from Dr. Coleman to everyone here, and all three of you. Some 43% of the military are people of color, yet approximately only 1% is at the top making decisions. If you can advise our first Black Secretary of Defense, how would you advise him to change the percentages at the top? And I send that out to you all here.
Can I speak on that as a person?
Yes, you will.
As a person that's almost 100% white. You know, my grandmother's mother was born of a dark Native American on the plantation. So I was there's no such thing as an all white person from the South, I believe, but regardless of what the KKK say, but I'm mostly white and I present as white. But I just want to say that the military promotes combat leadership, and I'm not a combat leader. I'm in the Army. I was a civil affairs. I'm not an infantry guy. I'm not a warrior. I'm not a ranger. I'm just a civil affairs person. So I was a support person. So the military promotes up the infantry people, and even in the Marine Corps, the pilots are the infantry people. The what I saw when I was a Marine, they promoted those folks up, and for some reason, and I don't know why, but the military has fewer combat arms people of color. Most of the military that when I was in the military and I did this demographics because of my job, the most of the people of color were drawn into the technical fields, the very smart fields, aviation support, the people that know how to read, all those things. And so the people, the infantry people and the combat arms people are predominantly white. And so as they go up in a pyramid, you know, they stay white. But again, Lieutenant Colonel Walker and the Sergeant Major may have something to say about that.
Take it away.
So I would say this here, and first and foremost, you don't become the Secretary of Defense. You got to have something upstairs, and I think if we watch the Secretary of Defense, you know, I think he's well in tune to, if he looked across all the services, I think he's well in tune to see the disparities. So now, but let me say the flip side of this too, because I think, you know, what Duncan said, you know, what he said is very important, because as an African-American, let me say this right here. This is the flip side. And when I would go in and mentor, you know, folks of color in the military, the younger ones. So I used to be a drill instructor at the Officer Candidate School, and you would see, you know, folks of color show up, you know, not prepared in this vein, because, you know, we are not structured to go into, you know, the Boy Scouts, the Cub Scouts, the Girl Scouts, because we're not structured. Where our counterparts, they grow up in this process somewhat of being mentored, and it helps. It helps because they show up prepared. So I would tell, especially people of color, you know, you just don't grow up and turn into a general officer, because it takes time, you know, and what it goes, the process, the maturation process, you know, then, you know, sometimes, you know, you got to work on some people that may not like you, or but you have to see it through. And the combat arms is the field that we promote to a lot of the leadership positions. But a lot of people of color, because the way they were brought up, you know, they want to go into fields that, you know, hey, that when I get out, I got to be able to something I can fall back onto. And a lot of times the combat fields is not a field that I think, well, I can't go out and be no infantry guy in small town America or in the corporation. And this is where we have to show them, like, yes, you can, because of the critical thinking involved, the processes, the education that you receive. This will help you. So, and those are some factors too, because, you know, the big five, you know, GM and all these other companies that recruit them, and they leave, they get out of the service and they go leave for the six-figure incomes. And so you see a disparity at the top with people of color. But I'll just close here and say, I think, you know, the Secretary of Defense, because I watch him, you know, I'm a subscriber to DOD News, and I see a lot of moves that are being made, which is for the future of the Department of Defense. And I think you will like where we're headed.
Okay.
I mean, I disagree with everything that Duncan and Gary said. I would say that those are the issues. I would just hit also on the mentorship and the fact that the military is a small sample of what we have in our world today. I mean, if you look to the top of our world today, it looks exactly the same. And why is that? So if we want to make change happen, we have to explore those issues. You know, we're bringing in more people and more diverse people, but then how do we get them to those positions if we want them there? I think it takes a lot of mentorship to do that. The people that are in those positions now, let's try and dive into that. How did they make that happen? And how do we continue to make it happen? How do we, you know, increase those numbers? Just being diligent about it.
Kelly, just if you could get Noreen to ask a question. She's coming to us from Australia, and you know it's probably 4 a.m. or 4 something over there.
Yes, well, we can go to hers and then we'll take Igal's question after that one. Okay, Narelle, thank you for hanging in there with us. It's 4:47, actually now closer to 5 a.m. in Australia, and she feels honored to listen, although saddened to hear such discrimination against you because of your career choice. I am passionate about removing discrimination in the job market. If you can do the job, it shouldn't matter what gender, age, background, color, shape, previous job, et cetera, et cetera. So the question is, if you could give one piece of advice to the general public to help them understand why discrimination is toxic, based on the lessons you would have learned, what would that be? And I'm going to, that's to all of you. And anyone can answer, jump in first, just as you have before.
I think it goes back to, again, my thing about children. You know, we have to start at the early age and teach children about inclusiveness, multicultural abilities. I mean, my son is so mixed. He doesn't even, Lord have mercy, he doesn't even know, you know, what he is. I mean, and I think that's good, and I think that's America. And I think the younger generation, and one thing I saw when I was recruited by Gunnery Sergeant Holloman back then 100 years ago when I joined the Marines, it was a different Marine Corps. I mean, the KKK was all in Camp Pendleton. It was pretty bad. But then fast forward to today, or my last tour in Afghanistan, and these guys, these young soldiers were talking to my first sergeant, who was a squared away African-American first sergeant, a paratrooper. And they asked him, hey, have you seen this new video, like a TikTok type video or whatever it was? And he's like, no, I haven't seen that. Or what is it? And he said, it's called a trunk monkey. And then he kind of got offended because, you know, these youngsters, and they were of color too, but they didn't know that, they didn't even know, at that time, they didn't know what the negative saying about monkey was, you know. But it was just a video about a monkey that gets out of the trunk and beats people up, and it was just dumb. But the thing was, we're losing some of that hate as we step forward. We're, you know, and I think somebody mentioned the January 6th thing. As we step forward, we're going back a little bit. As we step forward in LGBTQ things, you know, we went back a little bit. But I think we just have to keep stepping forward, and then we won't go back so far, and no more back stepping. But we are going to take some back steps, but to go forward, and that's just the nature of the business.
Thank you.
I concur with Duncan 100%.
I heard you all mention your left and right. I mean, that's not defining who they are. It's just those on the left and the right. And it really resonated with me, because if we can not define, just acknowledge them as being colleagues, that might help too.
Yeah, no, I think history, I like what Duncan was saying about it kind of repeating itself, you know, up and back and forth. But I think with, you know, we saw that in racial terms in the military, you know, with kind of them not allowing, I don't know if you've seen the movie, is it Red, I'm thinking, is it Red Birds, or I'm probably messing up the name, but when they have, you know, black pilots were allowed to fly, I'm probably messing up the name of the movie, but then, you know, the same thing now then, when women were allowed to fly, and then now they're allowed to be in all the different job fields in the military. It just seems like the reasons why we weren't allowed to do these things were never kind of related to the job. It was like once they started exploring the elements of the job, it became clear like what people can actually do and the quality that they bring to the elements of the job. And so that's the beauty, I think, behind it, that's in your question as well, that it really comes down to what are the needs of the job, and does the person have that? And so that's what makes the team work.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Okay, now we'll go back to Igal's question. Igal, welcome back to us today for this panel. And so I'm actually going, you had mentioned for a couple of them, but actually all three of them could answer this question because they have had tours of duty in Afghanistan, Iraq, or both here. And so we've just seen it proven again that winning a war or territory is a lot easier than winning the peace, that is, managing that place afterwards. We failed to prioritize teaching civil society and human rights in Afghanistan and Iraq, and so failed to win the peace in those places. Major Smith illustrated wonderfully that our strength as a nation was derived from valuing each other's rights. What can we do so that next time we're in conflict with people in some place, we prioritize replacing the education systems that existed in those places with human rights and civil society education? And anyone can jump in once again and kick it off.
I'm going to jump in. I was civil affairs, and what my job was to be in between the military combat people and the civilian populace. And then I was supposed to work in between to support the villagers and support the American military folks, whether it be Marines or Army guys going into combat, or gals, whatever, going into combat. And in doing so, I ran against a lot of people, a lot of what's called ethnocentricity. And so when we're fighting from Kuwait to Baghdad, some commander, said, "Hey, Captain Southall, or hey, JD, what, you know, I go by many names. My dad is Jarrell, but I go by Duncan, my middle name. But anyway, he said, hey, so let me get this straight. Sunni is bad and Shia is good. I'm like, what? That's nuts. I mean, that's like saying Methodist in America is bad and Presbyterian is good or whatever. That's just nuts. And we just don't have an understanding of other people's cultures, and we don't really want to understand other people's cultures. And we don't want to see, we don't like the Gary's South Carolina village. We don't want to go down there and see it, jump off 95 and see that town, because then it makes us feel bad. So we'll just drive on right on by, and we won't give them any money or any funding. And so that's the problem. We need to see everybody as a human being. And once we do that, we're going to solve all these other problems.
So to recapitulate what Duncan just said, so, you know, the fifth phase of combat operations is civil military affairs. And so I would say this right here because, you know, I can speak to the Marine Corps because, you know, I was in the Marine Corps. Our mindset was to always go win the hearts and soul and the minds of the populace that we were there, because kinetically we knew, you know, we just got a mindset as Americans, we can win anyway. But do you really win? You might have won the conflict, but really, once you go in, and this is one of the things the Bush administration, Bush 2, they did a good job of understanding that, hey, look, if you break it, you own it. You know, we have to be able to stay in here and the after effects, once the kinetic piece is over with, you know, do we have the right pieces? And that is the thing that we have to understand. I don't want to get into, you know, the political aspect of, you know, like us coming out of Afghanistan, but you also have to realize you have to do the history on the populace of where you're at, you know, because those who fail to read the history, definitely, you know, you repeat it. And in some places you have to understand the culture and what that culture is about, because everybody does not want to adapt to what we believe in America or what we think right should look like. And when we can realize and understand that, you know, we will fare off much better too. But the point I want to make is we always try to win the hearts and minds of the populace.
Dr. Walker?
Yes.
I have something I have to say about this. I just wanted to hear what you have to say, what your comment is first.
Oh, okay, sure. I was going to say that I do understand that the military, I mean, speaking from that aspect, that's not always our first, you know, mission, right? It's first to fight, you know, to go in and kind of create that peace in the area or the calm of whatever might be happening. And it's not so much thinking, I guess, always of the after effect of, you know, the education system and everything else, putting that in place, even though that might be the fifth kind of pillar there, and it takes a lot longer to do that of the civil affairs. But I think Duncan made a good point. If we're not tied in with the cultural values of where we're going, we can't instill our values onto another country. It's going to be important that they're just as much invested in the change that's presented that we would be in helping them to create any change that's there. So that would be the only thing I wanted to add.
Okay, so I taught in an Arab town in Israel for 7 years, an English program that was actually a civil society human rights program. And so I got to know, you know, hundreds of students. It was in high school. And yes, it's very important to know their history. Yes, it's very important to understand their culture. At the same time, the United States didn't become the greatest country in the world, as Sergeant Major Smith said, by happenstance. It wasn't because of any national or racial supremacy. It was because of the objective value of liberty and teaching civil rights and civil society and enfranchising and empowering the greatest number of people possible. That's an objective reality that's going to be true everywhere in the world. And that's why everybody wants their liberty everywhere. And the places where they're denied it, they fight for it. And if it is the culture in some places, based on the history of that place, that people are subjugated by a king or by religious supremacists of some sort, that doesn't make it right. And it doesn't change the fact that eventually they're going to come after us like they did on 9/11 or in Beirut, because they object, the dictators and the supremacists, to the idea of liberty and the idea of empowering as many people as possible. This is a long-term conflict that's been going on for thousands of years between dictators and people who want peace. And so I'm thinking that at the end of the day, we're not solving anything by just winning a battle. And it's not the army's problem. It's something that the civilian leadership ought to be mindful of. And I don't think that the Bush administration did a good job, because they allowed Iraq to remain a Muslim supremacist country, saying things in the Constitution like the president has to be a Sunni and the vice president has to be, the prime minister has to be a Shiite or something like that, allowing Muqtada Sadr to run roughshod and not corralling him when they had a chance. And now, you see what kind of problem he's becoming. And it seems to me like the only end game to this is to create a civil society and a human rights society, not in a way that conflicts. There's plenty of examples in talk about Muslim history, in Islamic history, of whether it's Sufis or whether it's individual, the Mu'tazila or the Hanafis, who were not supremacists like the Wahhabis and the Hanbalis are. Certainly, you can't paint everybody in a billion people with the same brush. There's enough humanistic tradition within the history of Islam that we could draw on that to side with the humanists and create an alternative to the Wahhabi Hanbali educational system that's poisoning the well over there. And if we don't do that, I don't know how we can expect not to get attacked again and not to have to go back there again, and then, God forbid, fail again. After World War I, the mandate system was proposed at Versailles, and the U.S. was given the mandate of Turkey. And then after President Wilson left office, we declined it. The Senate rejected it and said we don't want it, which I think was actually a smart move, because I don't see how you could hope to build a civil society among a bunch of people that at the time we were hopelessly prejudiced against. Now, I'm hoping that by now we're not at that low level, and we're maybe at a level where we could maybe not be so it's one thing to say, hey, we're so prejudiced and we're so biased and we're so bigoted that we can't succeed in this world, we should just give it up. I'm hoping that's not the case anymore, and that there is now a critical mass of people out there who are objective and open-minded enough and willing to look at people based on the content of their character and not on their religion or their skin color, that we could come up with some sort of a method and a Marshall Plan type of situation where we're creating, I hear people say you can't create a civil society and human rights in such an alien culture. Well, we did it in Japan. So why not in Iraq?
Yurgo,
Yes.
Yurgo, I hear you, and I think it may be important for me to tell the audience that Yurgo and I will be having a session that is going to be beginning next Tuesday. It's going to be 7 o'clock in the evening, and we're going to be diving into all these things around the world,
Yes.
including the Jewish, or what you may call better Ethiopians, the Jewish people who had been there for 2,000 years. And yet when they went to Israel, they were they were being mistreated because of the pigmentation of their skins. All those things we're gonna be discussing. So you're gonna bear with me. Let's shift back to Kelly, and we're gonna be visiting those things. And I have to tell you to be tuned.
And I
for
look
that session.
forward to that discussion on Tuesday as well. So thank you, Igal. I want we're coming down to the wire here. I have one more question and a couple of statements. The statements I'm going to just summarize here in the interest of time. But the question, another one that came in from Ahmed, is how are, and this builds right off of this last one here, how are Muslims and Muslim organizations reacting to your work? How do you build bridges, especially since a lot of Muslims are against both US and British foreign policy? And it's something I deal with here, and anyone could take that question.
Duncan, you're on mute. But
I tried to unmute. I was, that's my Marine Corps training coming in. Doesn't allow me to make it. So as a Muslim, I did try to bridge that. I'm a Sunni Muslim, but I understand what you were saying about Muqtada al-Sadr, al-Sistani, and the different factions of the Shia that we kind of botched, to say the least. But that's a different subject. The biggest thing is, how do we bridge, right? How do I bridge? I bridge from one conversation to another. As a Muslim person, I have bros that are Shia, Sufi. My sister is Sufi. I'm all about bridging that gap. And it's, again, go back to our children. How do we bridge that gap? We treat each other with kindness and respect. And as a civil affairs officer and as a social worker, I use the same weapon. I have a sword, and the sword of compassion and kindness. And I go out there and I slash with compassion and kindness, and that's how I build bridges.
oh wow,
Indeed.
yeah, I like that. I thought you were gonna say you have the knife hand, go in there. So I think yeah, I think I just try to use an awareness. I don't know much. I can't say I know much about the Muslim community other than, being surrounded by it, but while living, in Iraq, in the Middle East, around Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Kuwait, throughout those areas, and being, kind of, learning about their prayers and how they lived in that way, and then being able to kind of like teach, my children from that, what I saw. And I think in those ways, but I think from the military aspect too, just being able to see their culture and interact with them, and whether they're from their religion or, their food and different things I was able to experience. I think that your experiences help to build bridges in a way like that, and to be able to talk to people if they make comments that aren't, that are disparaging or something like that, that you could say like, well, I that wasn't in my experience dealing with Muslims that I worked with, or something to that degree.
Gary?
Yes, I would certainly agree. Being a novice myself on the Muslim faith, just based upon being in the military, and when you go into those environments, we would do culture sensitivity training, and which is the best of what the military could give us. The do's and don'ts, but I'm just a small country boy, and my parents taught me to love everybody, right from wrong, and treating everybody with dignity and respect. The golden rules. So so I would just leave it at that.
Okay, thank you. And now for the two statements before I go to our last question here. Let's see where, okay, so Robert Norell, I guess she is not here, but I think you can read in the chat there what he had written to her about the excellent diversity training method of listing 5 more core values and trying to find the commonalities among each other in that diversity training classroom, as well as outside the classroom, really, when it comes down to it. And then Akil had another statement here, and I'm going to paraphrase some of it, for length here. And he didn't want anybody taking this question personally. He said, sometimes peace is purchased with violence. As an individual, he does not like to hold a weapon to make peace, but as a soldier, he needs to hold it. Let me just come down. I think that you could read most of it. I have to come over to this. Give me a good reason to do so. As a graduate, it is my dream to serve my nation. I think Army is perfect choice for that. I am happy for that, but I don't like bad politics dominating Army. Army won't change, but government changes so fast here. And I think that he is referring to his home country of India in that one. So on that, thank you, Akil. On that note here, each of you, we're at 10:23 right now. Any closing remarks that you would like to make? And any of you can jump in and start.
I would just close, my closing remarks would just be to thank each of you for attending and listening, and on this Veterans Day. It means a lot to me, and also just to be able to, thank other veterans that you see or in your life, because it's supportive to know that you still have connection with people. As Duncan alluded to earlier, we do have, this rising cases of suicide amongst our veterans today, and the pandemic really heightened that as well. So just if you do know people that have served, reaching out to them and acknowledging their service, or just even checking in with them from time to time is important, because if you can connect with people, that's what it's about. So I encourage you to do that.
And I recapitulate what Dr. Walker said. Thank all the veterans because your service is what this nation has been able to thrive upon, and to have this on Veterans Day, just to think about the outreach of diversity and inclusivity of all Americans, and the SDIG, the global outreach. I think because we're all in this ship together, and it's so important. And thank you for allowing me to be a part, of this event today.
You're welcome.
I'd like to say the same thing, basically, that everybody is just so wonderful here on this panel, and I'm just in awe to be here amongst y'all. And again, anything that I can do for anyone, I will do so. And I work to support stop the pandemic of suicide amongst veterans, and I know that stretches across the UK as well. And so whatever I can do to help or support anyone, I'll be glad to do for y'all.
And I think there is one more thing, Duncan, that you would like to mention, and I have a link to it in here.
Yes, I am pursuing a petition to support some soldiers that deserve credit. I'm not necessarily asking for myself. I was on that mission, but this is a part of some soldiers that saved some lives of some prisoners, of some Iraqi prisoners after Abu Ghraib, and they never got recognition. And I'm trying to recognize these soldiers. And I was just a member of the team, but really I want to recognize the snipers. I want to recognize the medics, and I want to recognize the youngsters that were doing the good work of saving people. And that's what this petition is about. And it's not political. It's not left. It's not right. It's not, it's just about doing the right thing for these young soldiers.
And the link is in there. And I've also, the LinkedIn posts that I've put up about this petition over I helped Duncan to write this one. But over the last couple of weeks, there are 3 different posts. You can also go there in case you don't catch the link here. And Dr. Joseph, are you here?
Yes,
For your closing remarks.
I'm here. I'm in awe with all of you. I can understand where you are coming from, and my heart goes out to you. And I encourage you to stay the course. Just by listening to you, various ideas and various experiences. Again, I want to say that my 5th grade teacher told us, he just came in one day, it was on Monday, and came in and said, we're going to study history. Why do we study history? He said, because, he proceeded to answer, history is the study of past events. Then he went further to say, if we don't study history, we're not going to know the terrible things of the past, says like Nazi. But if we study history, then it will sharpen our mind to thinking through on future trajectories of our decision making. And I can pinpoint each and every one of you for tremendous ideas you brought into this equation, but I can say that I understood when Gary Smith said that people in leadership cannot just, I'm paraphrasing here, they cannot just wish the light and what they want comes into being. Say, for instance, when we talk about African Americans not being in position of, just like where they should be, because of what we know that has been existing and still with us today, persistent racism, whether it's overt or covert. And sometimes some people cover certain behavior just to keep their heads above water. I'm referring to when Gary made a comment about the defense secretary. I can understand. I'm a teacher. I know that there are some students who they sent from some urban areas that are not prepared to be in college. These people have not been given the tools to succeed. And then you see them coming to the college because they have horrible schools that never prepared them. They never thought they would go to college, giving them A grades when they don't even deserve a D grade. And they cannot read. Is it the fault of the people because of the pigmentation of their skins? Absolutely not. I shifted back to the system that has projected where they want the person to be, the limit of their minds. The same thing happens in everything. Talk about housing, talk about jobs, talk about criminal justice, talk about all these things. So to say, we have a lot of work to do, including calling out on those that purport to be leaders, because true leaders should not do what I think some leaders do. So I have to end by thanking all of you from the bottom of my heart and charge you to continue the path you are following. We will make it. Liberty, freedom is never in question. That is what liberates all of us, even liberates those who purport to be that, but end up continuously perpetuating the cycle of discrimination, whether it's in terms of race, gender, social class, cultures, the country you may come from, your religion, etc., all the isms, if you will. We have to keep working. And in the word of Cornel West, we're going to surround ourselves with like-minded people whose purpose is to foster peace, equity, and social justice for all. On that note, I thank you all.